Hello, hi. My name is Pamela, and I'm the director of Abundance of Hope Center.
I'm Selena. I'm programs manager.
And I'm Marissa. I'm operations manager.
And we're here today from Abundance of Hope to discuss, in light of all this talk about predators that's going on, we wanted to talk about predatory behavior in safe spaces.
Yes, on this episode of Just Look video blog.
Yeah, and so we'll just kind of be chatting like we do sometime when we get together about different topics. And this topic really hit home for me because it's one of the many reasons that I got the passion to found Abundance of Hope, because of witnessing predatory behavior in the shelters that I worked in that were supposed to be safe spaces. So that's what we're going to talk about, predatory behavior in safe spaces or safe spaces.
I feel like it's also something that we encountered when we were doing outreach. Remember, we were doing outreach this past year a lot, and one of the times that we were doing outreach, we were speaking with a group of youth, and they were explaining why they weren't interested in going into shelters or getting help.
We're doing
from
some surveying,
of the,
actually.
Exactly, from some of the other organizations that are out, and one of the main reasons that literally all of them had in common was that they were being re-victimized in these places. They were being re-victimized by other participants there that maybe shouldn't have been in that same population. They're being re-victimized by the staff and volunteers, and it was just something that they felt like they would be more safe out on the streets than in those places, and that was really telling for me.
Absolutely. I mean, I actually I know of the outreach that you're talking about because I was struck in the exact same way when we were doing our surveying. And this is I want to make it clear that this is across demographics, right? So we talked to young white men, older white men, young black girls,
black
boys, white girl, like everyone is being re-victimized in these safe spaces. And so at a certain point for me, I want to know where does the accountability begin,
exactly.
Right? Because I'm all about accountability. And for one thing for me in particular that grinds my gears is when we are working in these systems, and I swear I was just talking about this, when we're working in these systems that are supposed to be addressing or countering systems that we know are oppressive and we know lead to marginalization and ultimately premature death for certain communities, and then they're perpetrating that same toxic behavior, and that's just something that happens when youth are re-victimized in these safe spaces. Not to mention what it does to the trust that you have to build, you must build.
It when breaks that trust, and
right,
it makes
when
it
you're
hard.
A service provider and you're trying to provide this service to the community,
exactly.
You need them to trust you.
And not only that, encountering these youth who had already had their trust broken, it was even harder for us to connect with them, right? Because now they're like, well, I've already been in this situation, and it made it where I was re-victimized, and I wasn't actually safe where I was supposed to be safe, and I wasn't receiving the help that I was supposed to receive. So now why should I trust you? Why should I even take the chance to go into this other organization or, receive services from this other organization when I might, again, find myself being re-victimized, and they just want to protect themselves from that.
Yeah, and it's really a passionate topic for me because having myself been victimized so much in places that were supposed to be safe. I kind of went through my whole life experiencing these negative predatory behaviors in my own home, visiting with my friend as a young girl, spending the night at her house, literally in the 5th grade being raped by her brother.
Yeah.
And that was my first experience with sexual predators. So that I really take serious, you know, and because people look at, go get counseling and do this, but that's seriously something that stays with you all your
Forever,
life. You
yes.
never, ever truly get over being in a place that you felt was safe for you, but it wasn't. So it's like, what is safe?
Yeah, exactly.
Even as a young girl, having to put a lock on my door because I didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sorry, but
it's okay.
Yeah, you definitely don't have to be
this is
sorry.
a very passionate subject for me. And then turning around working, and when I say safe spaces, working in a shelter with youth. And I worked at this shelter for 4 years, and I literally seen 3 different women prey off of those young boys. One of them was, all of them were actually, 2 of them were my shift partners. And one of them, when she walked in the door, she came in going, I love me some young boys.
Yeah,
and I'm
that's
like,
gross.
what the heck? And she says this, and
this was a youth shelter.
this
yeah?
is a youth shelter, and you can say what you want about it to the supervisors, but in all actuality, there was so much wrong going on in this particular shelter that there was no one you could complain to.
It's systemic.
Because it was systemic. It ran deep. I mean, you had this worker having an affair with these workers. The kids are talking about it. So it's really not a good environment. I actually did say something about some of the people, some of the behaviors, but when you have administration that say this person is good for them, because one of the ladies there was very efficient, so she was close to the program manager, and she did a lot of the stuff for her so addressing it
basically did her job.
Yeah, but didn't get done. But eventually that woman, there was 3 different programs. The one I worked at was an emergency shelter. So we had kids supposedly for a short period of time. The longest they stayed there is 30 days. And then one of the other shelters was for kids 16 and older who were more self-sufficient. They can go to school on their own. Some of them had jobs. Well, eventually one of the ladies who they would not let go of, they ended up finding her having sex with one of the young boys in a car. Another young boy came in there, and I kind of got close to him, talking to him, because he was from Los Angeles. When he first came in, he was loud, and everybody was a little bit scared of him. This was in Vancouver, Washington. It was not diverse at all when we were living there. We were probably one of 6 black families in the whole area. And so I was really comfortable with them. They were a little paranoid of him until I kind of explained to him that because he's allowed, a lot of people are allowed in our communities. And it was another woman who worked there. She was a white woman who was married to a black guy, and she confirmed it. So of course it was okay, since she said that it was okay, and people got a little bit more relaxed to him. But that boy purposely got himself put into a shelter because he wanted to be put in a foster home so that he can get an education and help his sister, who was a teen mother, raise her kid. This kid came in with hopes and dreams. They hired this woman, and I actually did go to HR about her because I knew her personally, and was telling them what type of person she was. I really didn't even want to work with her, but I needed a job. I had kids to take care of, and I loved working with these kids. And so she left with that African American boy that I was telling you about that had hopes and dreams. She ended up taking him home with her, and he ended up in jail. That's where he ended up. And the one who I said came into the shelter going, I like me some young boys, she left with 2 of those boys. And from what I heard, in the future, she still had a job, working with kids. So you have these predators coming into this space, and because of who they are and the population that they're working with, which is usually, like I said, I was in the emergency shelter, so these were kids who were either runaways, foster kids, they're coming through. The most that they were supposed
They're
to stay there
vulnerable.
was a month. Yeah, so they're very vulnerable, and these were the kids that were being preyed upon. And I mean, it was just really disgusting, because there was nothing that I felt that was in my power I could do. No one I can go
There's
talk to.
no accountability.
There was, because the people who were running it at this time were behaving in a manner that wasn't conducive with them in that shelter also. And the kids knew, because they would talk about it. So that's one of my things for wanting to work with these youth, is because of the all the things that I saw that was so wrong within other shelter systems. And a lot of the things that I have incorporated in Abundance of Hope do come from personal experiences growing up in South Central Los Angeles, going through a time where I was watching social changes coming about. I grew up, my family was very active in the social changes. So one of the things that inspired me to want to work with youth was seeing my auntie, when I was a young child, work for, actually she was assistant director as a teen post, and she was working with hardcore gang members. I remember the names were Smoke Bomb, Monsoon, Bear. These are big guys, and they were really a force to be reckoned with, but they were like putty to her. I mean, they had the utmost respect for her, but she showed them love. She took them on field trips. They had talent shows, so she brought out their natural talents, and she was always real with them. She told them she didn't, what they were doing, that, wasn't okay. They could come in there and, make better of their lives. And so this, as a young kid, just watching, knowing what these guys were capable of, because literally I saw one of those guys snatch a door off a car during an altercation. Not to say they didn't, they still weren't involved in gangs, or they still didn't have unruly activity outside of there, but like whenever they would come there, they knew they had to leave it at the door, because my auntie wasn't having it, and they loved her, and so seeing that was inspiring for me, because here, like I said, these rough guys that were big and scary to me as a kid, I knew what they were capable of, but with her, they were so gentle. I mean, they not can't say anything that never broke out, because I remember being young, there was a fight because the guy who was actually director went out there to stop it, and he literally ended up with his teeth knocked out of his mouth. My auntie went out there and said stop, and everybody froze. And so I really looked at when I say the impact she had on these kids with her tough love, her tough, unconditional, unjudgmental love, that really left an impression on me. And clearly
was able to do it without being a predator. So
she definitely wasn't nothing predatory about her.
Well, there you go.
She was actually, I would say, would be more an avenger for people who are preyed upon, because she was definitely there for me, and she was definitely there for them. And like I said, as a child, I just saw how they, the things she offered and how these young guys reacted to her. But now, as when being an adult and looking back, I realized she had to really have a lot of patience and a lot of love to get at that point.
And they had to have a great respect for her, really.
They did. I mean, I had the utmost respect for her as an auntie. How she treated me, and she would always tell me she loved me just like she do her own kids, and I felt that love from her, and I saw that love transcended our household, because she loved those kids. She loved that. She put her heart into that teen post. She would bring things from her home to help them, and I don't even remember where the funds came from, who was funding this. I don't remember any of the technicalities. I just remember as a young kid going with my auntie to the teen post. And so that's wasn't any predators there, and none that I knew of, and I'm pretty sure we would have known of them. And so it brings me back to those safe places, because for those boys, even though they were in a gang, that was a safe place.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
they
it was
knew my
absolutely
auntie
safe.
was safe, and they knew she wasn't a predator, and they knew she had their best interests at heart. And like I said, that was one of the things, her and seeing the results and what love will do for a person, and how
The
to change them,
non-predatory love.
and non-predatory change them. Yeah, that was part of my
There's
inspiration
no
for
love in
you
predators.
too. Yeah,
And
and
predatory
and,
behavior, I
right,
should
exactly.
say.
And I think that really just reminds us, really, like hearing about it and the whole R. Kelly thing going on. It reminds us that girls are victims of predators and boys are.
yes,
And you know, so it's any
And
gender.
non-binary folks
exactly
are.
non-binary folks. There's and it transcends different industries. It's in the music industry, it's in the nonprofit industry, it's in the education
It's in
system,
Hollywood.
definitely.
it's in Hollywood. Like, these predators are everywhere. They're men and they're women and they're non-binary, non-binary, and the victims are the same.
Yeah.
So we just need to realize that anyone can be a victim of a predator.
It's just sadder though when you're in a position that you're providing a service that's supposed to help these youth, nurture these youth.
Well, that's how
and
they
empower
pray.
'em, 'cause
They're literally choosing vulnerable populations,
Yeah.
and usually it's someone in a position
so
of power.
to
So
re-victimize it, and I understand that, because I remember even being younger, being in awe of Father Flanagan Boys Town, and that whole aspect that they had going on there. Yeah, and
it
that's
makes
really.
it is so uncomfortable when you bring up Father Flanagan.
I mean, it's really you. They even had a movie about it. You know, it wasn't
Yeah, no,
called
it was
that.
disgusting, but I just think
to
it's
grow
funny
up
that
and to
every time,
find
yeah.
out that they were preying off of the youth. I mean, literally taking them to Congress people to have sex with them, and
Where's
and,
the accountability?
yeah, and to see them, even when I say when you victimize kids, it stays with them, because these were adults, and this is kind of a, I want to say, what do you call those films that don't make it to the movies, but they're out there like on YouTube, like undercover films, but it's one of these films, documentaries, where they're talking about it. No, this is a documentary.
Documentaries sometimes make it to film.
No, okay.
Theaters and
No, it's not. Well, anyway, they're talking to these young people who went through that, and
Right.
they're adults now. And I mean, this guy, he said, I'm on drugs, and I'm always be on drugs. He said, I'm an addict, you know, but and what he went through, and he talks about how horrific it is. I mean, when you look at people who went through it and hear them talk about it,
They
and how it
start
still affected them.
self-medicating.
Look at even the guy who, and this was years ago, had sex with the teacher, and he ended up getting her pregnant, and she went to jail, and they have kids. Now that he's an adult, I seen a film with him, and now that he knows what went on
that
when
he
he
was
was
being
younger,
groomed, and he was
he
preyed
is
upon.
disgusted by that.
Yeah.
You know, he's there with his kids, raising them now, and they're adults, but in retrospect, now he's looking at her a lot different. You
It's
know,
that lifelong
yeah,
thing you're talking about.
you know, when you look back, and he's like, and I couldn't even imagine, you were my teacher.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I trusted you.
Yeah.
Because we're taught to trust our teachers. We're taught to trust our doctors. We're taught to trust,
The
people
people who
in
provide
authority.
mentors.
Yeah, mentors. And so even in the shelters, the kids, we're the authority there. You know, so they trust us. And when you
They should be able
damage
to,
that
yeah.
trust, that is something that, from personal experience, I don't know if you can ever really, truly get that back. You know, get that space where there's going to always be something that's going to be a trigger to that. I mean, and like I said, from my own personal experiences, having not really understood what was going on, when you get older and you start thinking about it and you understand, it comes out in ways that you might not even detect. You know, so even, I don't know if a person went through some extensive therapy, how they would come out of it, but like I said, I would imagine in that dark corner, recessive part of their mind, that's gonna be there. That's when they say those life
Yeah, that's
scars,
subconscious.
that's a life scar. So
We need to protect these babies.
We need to protect them, and not only
And accountability,
and hold the people who are doing it accountable, because you have people in these positions of power and authority that abuse them, and when you abuse this power and you damage these kids, like that woman, they knew what she did. The one that came in talking about she liked some young boys, but there was nothing to follow her that would stop her from getting a job working with kids again.
Right.
Because people who, I'll just say, some people who go through these industries have the protection of the people who are in these industries, because they all look alike.
Complexion for protection.
Yeah, that complexion for protection. And they don't want to look bad. Because even when I looked back the other day, I seen somewhere on Better Business Bureau, the guy who happened to be the director of the shelter I was working at, and mind you, I said 2 of them closed down. Well, I look back, and this is almost 10 years ago. He made $400,000 a year 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And they closed down 2 of the programs. And I'm like, no wonder why they had to close it down. $400,000 in a year? What was this man doing? And
he clearly wasn't finding competent staff.
Oh, he had kids himself and foster kids. So he was making money off of them too. So some people really get into these spaces to be predators, because when you think about it, like I said, not only are our youth our future, but our youth are vulnerable as hell today, especially those who are queer. They're vulnerable, because a lot of them are leaving home because
they don't have
their home space
doesn't exactly.
And so they're looking for safe spaces, and then they come into these spaces and be re-victimized. And then you have kids who, like one time, this psychologist that came into Oak Ridge, he said, in one of our meetings, he said, I want you to give this some thought about these kids that are in here. He says some of these kids have walked far from home. They're miles away from home. They have walked in the dark. They have faced being murdered. They know what's out there. They can be murdered. They can be raped. They can be put into sex trafficking, but yet they still left at home.
Yep, exactly.
And we were all like, wow, you never give that any thought. And I can't even call it an adventure, but what these kids go through to escape their unsafe home life, only to come in and be re-victimized. And then you wonder why now you have a lot of drug addicts and alcoholics laying out on the street homeless in the city of Seattle. It's like, really, I wonder what their youth, it was like for them as a youth. What were they going through that didn't get addressed then, that now as an adult we're seeing the repercussions of it.
And we know that a number of them are suffering from mental illnesses. We know that. So either way, that was our little TED Talk of the day. No, that was our Just Look video. But predators in safe spaces. Predators are not okay at all. They definitely shouldn't be in safe spaces. That would be the last place that you would expect them, the last place that they need to be.
As service providers, we have an absolute responsibility to protect the youth that we come in contact with, and an absolute responsibility to protect the youth. Even if you need to protect the youth from yourself, protect that youth.
Exactly.
And they say a lot of people who victimize were victims themselves. So I would like to encourage people who were victimized by a predator to seek help, and to realize what you went through was not a good experience for you. So please don't inflict it on someone else, because as a person, like I said, who's been victimized a lot, I can definitely say it's something I would never want to see inflicted on another person at all.
All right, community, on that note, we'll see you next time for Just Look video blog.
Bye now.
Bye.